recording going? Yes, namaste and welcome everyone for our webinar on understanding the Daksinamurti Stotram by Adi Sankara. And so the Daksinamurti Stotram consists of 10 stanzas that expound the various tenets of Vedanta. The hymns are in the praise of Lord Dakshinamurti, visualized as the embodiment of self-knowledge. Hence, the text describes the reality of the self as the limitless Brahman in 10 verses, which are linked together in such a way leading to the discernment of the one indivisible reality, threading through the individual self, the world, and the causal principle Ishvara. The text, even though it's only 10 stotrams, pulls together the philosophical content of the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutras, the three core pillars of Vedantic knowledge, and presents a comprehensive summary. So in this webinar, we'll outline and provide background on the Dakshinamurti Stotram. That background right there was more than I knew before coming into this. As we do these webinars, I get informed on this, and it's always amazing to have experts who have studied these things like Dr. Swaminathan, who will do a deep verse-by-verse analysis in a course that we're also going to introduce. And so this is partly the beginning of the path for folks who want to enhance their understanding of the self through the teachings of the Dakshinamurti. So with that, let me give our guest a quick introduction. If you haven't yet put in the chat where you are zooming in from, we got Shankar Narayananji from New Jersey. Welcome, welcome. And so Dr. Swaminathanji is actually a doctorate in material science from the University of Southern California, USC. He got that back in 1975, and he worked for Bell Laboratories for 21 years in many aspects of fiber optic communication systems, maybe part of the reason why we're able to do these Zoom classes and online technology now. But beyond his technical background and his previous experience writing books, 8 patents, awards and accolades, and his affiliations with Penn State and Rice University in the Department of Physics and Material Science, he's been a student of Pujya Swami Dayananda Saraswati and other revered acharyas of the Arsha Vidya Gurukulam for nearly 30 years, which is where he is joining us from today. He's collected 365 quotes of Pujya Swamiji and published them as Day After Day with Swami Dayananda Saraswati. In addition, he's edited 2 booklets, Satyam and Mithya, and What You Love is the Pleased Self. I'll keep it short. There's so much more that we could go into about Dr. Swaminathan, but with that brief introduction, let me hand it over to him to help us understand better and give us some background on the Dakshinamurti Stotram.
Okay. Thank you, Ankurji. So let me share my screen. So thank you all for joining this webinar. I'm very pleased to be with you and tell you a little bit about the course that I'll be teaching beginning on July 11th. So we'll start with a quick prayer. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanav Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So the Dakshinamurti Stotram is a composition by Adi Shankara. At least it is attributed to Shankaracharya. In the Hindu tenets, we look upon everything in this creation as Ishvara. All that is here is Ishvara. This is a famous axiomatic statement by my Guru Swami Dayananda Saraswati. All that is Ishvara. And therefore, every knowledge, the source of that knowledge is traced back to Ishvara only. All that is here is Ishvara, and all that is here is nothing but knowledge. And the knowledge has to reside in an intelligent being. And that intelligent being, what we would say, Ishvara, the Lord or the Creator, whatever we want to label it as. Since everything is traced back to Ishvara, in the tradition, in the Vedic tradition, we look upon the teaching tradition, teaching of the Shastra. Shastra, by that I mean the Vedas and other associated literature, spiritual literature of Vedic Dharma. All the teaching tradition, the teachers also traced back to Ishvara. And so Ishvara, the Lord, is looked upon as the first teacher. And the teaching that Ishvara, the teaching of the Upanishads or the Vedas traced back to Ishvara, the teaching is essentially the teaching of the reality. If you examine the reality of an individual, such as you or me, then this individual confronts a world. And that world is, say, Jagat. Jagat means that which is born and gone. Jayati, gachati, iti Jagat. Because constantly there is creation as well as resolution. And that is Jagat. And the Jagat represents an intelligent creation, intelligently put together. If something is intelligently put together, there has to be an intelligent giver of the creation. Everything is given to us, and there has to be a giver. That giver is Ishvara, the Lord. But then if you examine what is the reality, the ontological reality. By ontological reality, I mean the existential reality of the individual and the Jagat confronted by the individual and the creator or the causal principle of the Jagat. What is the reality? What is the ontological reality? And that's what the Upanishads teach. And the Upanishads teach that the reality is one, and it is looked upon from different standpoints. So what is that absolute reality? The Paramarthika Satta, as we say, the absolute reality, the absolute truth, if you will. What is it, and how do you discern it? How do you own up to it? Is the basic principles of this reality is what is revealed by the Upanishads. And there is a lineage of teachers, and from generation to generation, there is a teaching tradition, there is a sampradaya. Sampradaya means that which is handed over precisely with the fidelity. So samyak pradhanam iti sampradaya. There is no transmission error. So there is a lineage of teachers. We have a teaching tradition going back to thousands of years. And we revere that teaching tradition. We revere our teachers and the teachers' teachers, but ultimately tracing back who the first teacher, namely the Lord. So we adore, revere that Lord as the teacher of this reality. So we have generally we recite, a dhyana slokam which describes this principle, namely the Lord as the teacher. Sadasiva samarambham Shankaracharya madhyamam Asmatacharya paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. So there is a Guru Parampara. Parampara means from transmission from one to the other, one to the other. The teacher gives it to a student, a Sishya. The Sishya then becomes a teacher, hands over to a student, etc. So there is a parampara of gurus. Guru means one who teaches this reality. That is the principal meaning. That, of course, then by extension, we attribute the term guru to anyone who teaches, a dance teacher, music teacher, ityadi. But really, the word guru means one who teaches this Brahma Vidya or Atma Vidya, the self-knowledge, which stands for the reality that I talked about. So there is a parampara. So this prayer, Aham Mande, I salute. Aham Mande, I salute this lineage of teachers. So in describing this lineage of teachers, this prayer first invocates Sadasiva Samarambham. Samarambham, that which has begun from Sadasiva. Sadasiva is this form of Shiva looked upon as the ultimate teacher or the first teacher, Sadasiva. And that Sadasiva is worshipped in the form as Daksinamurti, which is the deity in Arshavatya Gurukulam where I am currently sitting in. We will come to the Daksinamurti in a minute. So starting from that Guru Parampara, this lineage of teachers, began from Sadashiva, the Lord, as Daksinamurti. Then we mention a very great teacher in the middle, Sankaracharya Madhyamam. So Sankaracharya is the one who has given us how to look at the Upanishads and the Vedas, particularly the Upanishads. He has written commentaries because Veda is a Sabda Pramanam. It's a means of knowledge through words. It communicates through words, so the words have to be precisely understood. And Shankaracharya helped to put together, synthesize what the Vedas reveal. So we venerate Shankaracharya, who is a teacher to represent somebody in the middle. So we put Shankaracharya Madhyama. Then we have a current teacher, like I had Swami Dayananda as a teacher, and now currently another teacher. So Asmadacharya Paryantam completing with Asmat Acharya. So the current Acharya of us. Also, this is the Guru Parampara. So we state Sadashiva in the beginning. The teaching originates from the Lord. We have a link in between, which is Shankaracharya. Then the current teacher, whoever that may be. To all those teachers, I salute. This is a very beautiful and traditional prayer that every student of Vedanta recites, chants at the beginning of a class to express gratitude. Here, Lord Shiva is looked upon the teacher. Similarly, there is a sloka where Lord Vishnu is looked upon the teacher. Of course, whenever Hinduism is talked about, we normally represent that there is a creator, there is a sustainer, and there is a resolver. And we say these three functions, functional attributes, functional names are nothing other than Shiva or Rudra for resolver, Vishnu for sustainer, Brahma for creator. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva iti. So we put a framework around these three functions. These are functional names. So likewise, looking upon Lord Vishnu as the first teacher, there is also a verse similar to what I just said. Sadashiva Samarambham. Similarly, there is a verse. Jnananandamayam Devam Nirmalas Patika Kritim Adharam Sarva Vidyanam Ayagrivam Upasmahe. So in that tradition, Ayagriva is the form shown here. Ayagriva is the first teacher. And who is this Ayagriva? He is Adharam, the one who holds up. He is the basis of Sarva Vidyanam, all knowledge, not just only Atma Jnanam, all knowledge, empirical worldly knowledge as well. Sarva Vidyanam Adharam. And the Lord, this Hayagriva, is in the form of knowledge, Jnananandamayam. He is the effulgent Lord, Devam. Nirmala Spatika Akritim. His form Akriti is like a pure transparent crystal. So some veneration describing a form, and we salute that Hayagriva. So there's two forms, Dakshinamurti and Hayagriva, like complementary to each other. Similarly, there is a verse where Brahma, the creator, the functional name for creation of the Jagat, where who say Brahma is the creator, there is a verse attributing the lineage to Brahma also. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Sankara, before he writes a commentary, he offers this salutation, Om Brahmadibhyo Brahma Vidya Kartru Sampradaya Kartrubhyo Vamsha Rishibhyo Mahadbhyo Namaha Gurubhyo Namaha. Brahmadibhyo, everything originated from Adi, the beginning is Brahma. Brahma means the creator, Brahma onwards. Brahma Vidya Sampradaya Kartrubhyaha, Brahma Vidya Sampradaya Kartrubhyaha, this lineage of teachers. Vamshakritebhyaha, so this Vamsham, this Guru Vamsha that is available to us, the lineage of teachers. Mahadbhya, the great teachers, all those Gurubhyaha, Namo Namaha iti, there is a salutation. So, in other words, the basic idea here is, in the Hindu tradition, in the Vedic tradition, we don't really say that anything is something that we have made. Everything is given. All knowledges are given, functions are given, environment is given, attributes are given. There is nothing that is not given. So there is a giver. So everything is traceable to that giver. And that giver is the Lord, whom we say as the Lord. But ultimately it is the reality which, the absolute reality which sustains all kinds of manifestations. So that is the tradition, that is the Vedic tradition. So we venerate that Lord. So in that sense, the Dakshinamurti Stotram, which is, as I said, is attributed to Shankaracharya. We don't definitely know whether it is a composition of Shankaracharya, but looking at the depth of the information presented in 10 succinct verses, we could say it is probably Shankaracharya. The text itself, what is the depth of the text? The entire Upanishad Saram, the essence of Upanishads. Upanishads, there are many, but Shankara himself has written a commentary on 10 major Upanishads coming from all the 4 Vedas. And so all the Upanishads summed up the essence. He has condensed it in this Dakshinamurti Stotram. So that is the great significance of this text. As a matter of fact, in the tradition, a Vedantic student will normally come to study Dakshinamurti Stotram towards the end of his studies, after studying all the Upanishads, so as sort of a recapitulation of what he has studied by studying the Dakshinamurti Stotram. So, but we will study Dakshinamurti Stotram as an exclusive text so that to get a understanding of what the Upanishad message is. So thereby one can be inspired and go back and study the Upanishads also. A stotram, this is composed as a stotram. Stotram means a stuti. It's in the form of praise. It's a praise of Lord Dakshinamurti. So that is how a stotram is. It's a stuti rupam. It's just a praise. Like many stotras, like we have many stotras that Shankaracharya has composed. The Kanagadhara Stavam, which is a stotram. Then Bhavani Stotram, Subramanya Bhujanga Stotram. All these are praises of the Lord, of the respective deities. But here, an interesting thing is, in this incarnation as a teacher, an avatara, an incarnation as the first teacher, Dakshinamurti is mainly the purpose of the avatara is for revealing what is Atma, that is, what is the self. And the self ultimately represents the absolute reality, the ontological reality of the three things, individual, Jagat, and the causal principle. And that Lord here is presented in this Daksinamurti Stotram as the source of spiritual knowledge. And the basis of this text, which had inspired, assume that say it is Shankaracharya's, the basis of the text that inspired Shankaracharya is the Sutta Samhita of the Skanda Purana. There are 18 Puranas. Skanda Purana is one of the largest Puranas of the 18 Puranas. So it comes from the Sutta Samhita section. There the Lord, in terms of a form, he is represented as Ashtamurti, consisting of 8 aspects, but mainly as the maker and the material cause of the Jagat, the efficient cause as well as the material cause of the Jagat. And Shankara has written many texts which are exclusively profound and give the truth of, or what is the truth that is communicated, revealed by the Vedas. And in this, there are 3 major groups of his work. One is called Shruti Prasthanam. Prasthanam means a marga, a path. Shruti Prasthanam, where he has written commentaries on the Upanishads, the 10 major Upanishads. Smriti Prasthanam, he has written a lucid commentary on Bhagavad Gita. Then Brahma Sutras, which are considered as the reasoning, for purposes of reasoning, so Nyaya Prasthana. And he has written commentaries on all these 3, and a student of Vedanta would study these. Then he has written several Prakarana Granthas known as independent treatises on specific topics, specific Vedantic topics elaborated in one text. And there are many of them. Viveka Chudamani is very well known of his work. Then Upadesha Sahasri. Many stotrams I mentioned, Daksinamurti Stotram, Harimide Stuti, Kashi Panchakam, Maya Panchakam, ityadi. And in this Daksinamurti Stotram is not simply considered as a stotram like any other stotram. It's just not simply the praise of the Lord. It is considered actually a Vedantic Prakarana. So that means it comes under the category of an independent treatise on the essence of all the Upanishads thoughts, all the knowledge revealed by the Upanishads is all condensed together in this Daksinamurti Stotram. So it is Upanishad Saram. So in that sense, it is a Prakarana Grantha rather than a Stotra. It's not simply a Stuti, it is much deeper than that. And just for way of information, the Stotram is traditionally, if you go to, say for example, if you go to India and you go to Kashi to study Vedanta, or you go to Kailas Ashram in Rishikesh or whatever, if it is a traditional setting of learning, usually before the beginning of the class, the teacher, the Acharya, will chant, and other students will chant as well, this Daksinamurti Stotram. So this is a very, this Daksinamurti Stotram is considered so sacred in the teaching tradition. So every class, not that you begin this at the beginning of a course or something, every class, every time, if it is 3 times class, 3 classes per day, every time you chant this Daksinamurti Stotram, both the teacher and the students will chant. And generally the first 4 verses in the beginning of the class and the rest at the end of the class. So it is sort of the class, is, so to speak, is bracketed with the chanting of the Daksinamurti Stotrams. And every time this phrase Namaidam Sri Dakshinamurti, when this refrain occurs, because every one of the 10 verses has this refrain, the students stand and do namaskar. So these verses are highly revered in the tradition. The Lord is praised in the form of that very knowledge which he teaches, because in this stotram, the teacher is described in the form of the teaching itself. And there are, because of the importance of the Daksinamurti Stotram, many commentaries have been written. The most famous commentary is the commentary by Sankaracharya's principal student called Sureshwaracharya. And that commentary is usually Sureshwaracharya's works go by the name Vartikam. Vartika means a gloss, and it is given a special title, Manasollasa. And so Sureshwaracharya's commentary for the Daksinamurti Stotram, consisting of something like 144 verses or so. Then there is a commentary on the original stotra called Tattva Sudha by an Acharya called Swayam Prakasha, whose time is somewhere around the 17th century. Then there is a commentary on the Manasollasa, the Vartikam commentary by Ramatirtha, also around the 17th century. And this is Manasollasa Vrittanta. So further commentary on the Manasollasa. So you can see from the fact that it has attracted commentaries, and of course commentary by his principal disciple Sureshwaracharya. Sureshwaracharya is a very, very highly scholarly person, written Vartikams on Shankaracharya's Taittiriya Bhashyam, written Vartikam on Shankaracharya's Brihadaranyaka Bhashyam, and independently Naishkarmya Siddhi Ityadi. So very, very erudite scholar, and so he found it fitting to write a Vartikam on this Daksinamurti Stotram, only to highlight the importance of the Daksinamurti Stotram and the veneration that the teaching tradition holds for this text. So we are all, I feel very blessed to teach it, and we are, people who are taking this class will equally feel blessed by learning this profound text. So now in the next few minutes, I will describe the contents of this briefly. Then if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer. There are 10 verses. So it's, even though it's sometimes referred to as an ashtakam, there are 2 extra verses towards the end. So it constitutes totally 10 verses. The first verse presents the Lord as the satyam, or the truth of everything. In other words, this absolute reality is described. Then the second verse describes the satyam itself as the creator, the non-differentiated creator, namely any creation requires 2 causes. It requires an efficient cause, the intelligent cause, and it requires a material cause, upadana karanam, nimitta upadana karanam. In anything that you see in this empirical world, these 2 causes will be independent of each other. Suppose if you want to get a piece of bread, there is a material that makes the bread, and there is a baker who makes the bread. So the nimitta karanam and upadana karanam are different. But in this case, the verse will reveal that in the case of the Jagat, this creation that we confront, it is abhinna nimitta upadana karanam. You can't differentiate the nimitta and upadana like the baker and the bread. Here it is one, it's the same, one and the same. The same source is both the efficient cause as well as the material cause. The third verse tells that the liberation is liberation from a feeling of individuality and thereby a constraint. So that is what we say moksha. That liberation comes only from the knowledge that the self is the absolute reality. So comes from the knowledge of the self, and that has to come through Guru Upadesha. So a teacher has to use the pramana, which is the Veda or the Upanishads, and has to reveal what the Upanishads say to the student. So it has to be through a teacher only. It cannot come from an independent learning. Okay, I pick up a book and learn and gain this knowledge. That doesn't work, simply because it's a pramanam and where the prameya, the object of knowledge, is the self itself. So the self cannot both be the subject wielding the pramanam as well as the object of that pramanam. So therefore, that contradiction can only be resolved if someone else teaches the nature of the subject to the subject. So the liberation comes from the knowledge of the self taught by a teacher, so that the third verse emphasizes that. The fourth verse shows that this absolute reality, the self, is a self-evident and self-existent truth. So the self is self-evident and self-existent. Everything else becomes evident to the self, and everything else exists because of the self-evident self. Then the fifth verse describes the various contentions about the self. Of course, in the Vedic tradition, as well as in the non-Vedic traditions, like Buddhism, Jainism, etc., many speculations have been made about this creator, this giver of what is given to us, what is this reality. So many speculations have been done before, and so there are many contentions. Each one says something, this is what the reality is. And so the fifth verse goes through them, what others say, and then kind of bring us back to the footing again of what the Upanishads doctrine is. The sixth verse brings this knowledge close to oneself by analyzing the daily experiences of oneself, and particularly the sleep experience. The sleep is a very profound experience that every individual, every living thing goes through, and that is a door, it's an opening through which you can understand, or at least appreciate the reality, get a certain footholding. Yes, this is possible. What the Upanishad message is possible. That sambhavana, that possibility, the possibility of something, that confidence comes by just analyzing one's own daily experiences, particularly the sleep. And the sleep is discussed here in one of the verses. The seventh verse resolves the confusion between the knower and the known. So this confusion doesn't exist when the knower and known are different. Suppose if I know an object, I see a tree and I say this is a tree. I have an apple in my hand, I say this is an apple. The knower, the subject I, and what is known, the apple or the tree, are very different. So there is no confusion to resolve between the knower and the known. But in the case of the self, this confusion, who is the knower and what is known, that dichotomy is a constant struggle to resolve. So the seventh verse handles that very beautifully. Eighth verse presents this universe as a phenomenal reality. What you confront as a jagat is only an apparitional reality. It's only an appearance, a phenomenological reality, what we say vyavaharika sattva, which derives its existence from the paramarthika sattva, the absolute reality. So the eighth verse gives the ontological status of the jagat that we confront. The ninth verse presents an altar for the meditation upon Ishvara, for meditating upon this Ishvara, which is represented as the absolute reality. And so what we say nirguna, nirupadika Brahman. So Brahman which doesn't have an upadhi, an adjunct, or doesn't have a form or attribute, etc. So that meditation is really sort of a reflection and contemplation about that reality. So the eighth verse gives a framework for a student to think about this, to constantly practice and think about this, so that to absorb this knowledge and own up to that knowledge. The assimilation process becomes easier when you have a certain altar to reflect upon. The 10th verse, as I mentioned before, the 9th and 10th are added to the Ashtakam. The eight verses represents the subject matter. The 9th is sort of an altar for reflection. And the 10th verse is a Palashruti. Palashruti means describing the results that the seeker would get by reciting, understanding, more importantly, assimilating the stotra. But it is more than the stotra, it is essentially the Upanishad Saram. So this is how the arrangement of the 10 verses are. And what we plan to do in this course, and the course objectives as I envision it, is to examine these 10 verses of the Daksinamurti Stotram and discuss their meanings with a clear, detailed exposition. And where it is applicable and where it is possible, because in 11 lectures, it may not be possible to bring in all the associated commentaries from the Manasolasa, the Vartikam of Sureshwaracharya, but where necessary, we will take them also. So discuss the meanings of the verses in great detail so that we get a good understanding. And then hopefully that at the end, we will recognize the nature of the self in relation to the world and its cause. What is the self? What is this Atma Jnanam, self-knowledge? What does it mean? And so on. And a clear understanding of the basic tenets of Vedanta or the Upanishads. So these are the course objectives. And again, there are 11 lectures. The course material, I will provide these PowerPoint slides. I will be using PowerPoint slides, and these slides will be available after each class. And if it will help the students, I will be happy to put them before the class as well. That's not a problem. There are no electives required, but I would say as a prerequisite, if you have some exposure to the Vedanta Shastra, it is helpful. And if you have some ability to read the Devanagari script, then it will be useful as well. But if needed, I can provide the transliterated version of the verses so that people who cannot read Devanagari can benefit looking at the transliteration. But generally, I'll be using Sanskrit text, but all the lectures will be in English. All the explanations will be in English. So it is scheduled for a 90-minute duration each class. And of course, we will spend close to 75 minutes in lecture and 15 minutes for question answer pertaining to the subject matter discussed. Sometimes during class, you can interrupt me, but if it will make it more efficient, we will defer the questions towards the end, so that way we can finish the lecture and discuss the questions. So this is the thinking, but it's likely to, easy to modify and likely to be modified as we go. Attendance is important, of course. Unless you attend all the lectures, you don't get the full benefit of it. Of course, you can go back and listen to the lectures in case you miss something. But participation, a way of questions, doubts, whatever, that you are showing interest in the class, it's contribute to the final grade. There is some assigned weightage assigned to participation, attendance. And since it is a university credited course, there will be examination, a midterm and a final, that will carry some weightage as well. But nothing to fear about. These are all only to follow a process, and at the same time, if it will facilitate our understanding. And the resources, there are plenty of them, but I have selected a few. There is an excellent book, commentary by Swami Chinmayananda. And Swami Dayananda, there is a Kindle edition on Daksinamurti Stotram available from Amazon.com. And there is a very erudite commentary by Swami Tattvavidananda Saraswati, a student of Dayananda. And that book is available. Then there's Manasolasa by Swami Arshananda. This is the Vartikam by Sureshwaracharya, where all the 144 verses of Vartikam are given. And you can look at the Internet archive for other commentaries and so on. And the chanting of the Stotram, Swami Paramarthanandaji, another disciple of Swami Dayananda, there's a YouTube you can watch and follow the chanting. It's very simple meter and easy to chant, nothing complicated. So these are all there as background books for you. I won't be following closely any of these books, but I'll make my own slides and explain them as I go along for each verse. And in addition to the verses, there are also dhyana slokams, or meditative verses, written for Daksinamurti Stotram. There are many of them, and generally it is in the tradition there are 8 meditative verses prior to the Daksinamurti Stotram. The 8 verses are there, and these are traditionally chanted. And they also have some profound meaning. and actually will set the stage for entering into the Daksinamurti Stotram. So the first class I hope to spend on the Dhyana Slokas, 8 of them are there. Then one class per verse, so 10 verses, I should be able to cover in 10 verses, but we will play it by ear and see how it goes. So this is the plan. So if you have any questions at this stage, I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Wonderful. What a great synthesis and presentation of the Daksinamurti Stotrams. So I've dropped a link to the course in the chat. It's going to start July 11th. It's going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern time, which is on Tuesdays. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box and we can take them. I'll launch a quick poll asking if you are interested in enrolling in this course. Let us know, yes, no, definitely. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box. If you can't find it, you can put it in the chat and we can answer your questions. Shantaji from Montreal, glad to have you on. Namaste and welcome. If you'd like a shout out from where you are zooming in from, you could do that as well. All right. So it doesn't look like we're getting questions. So maybe just a little bit more in terms of what you expect in the course and what you expect students to do. Quizzes, tests, essays, reflections, or is it more of a kind of a conversation and back and forth about those stotrams as you go through course by course?
Yeah. What I expect is participation at every lecture, so that has some weightage in the final grade. The midterm and the final could be a presentation on some relevance of the Daksinamurti Stotram from what we have learned, whether the students have understood, so they can give a brief presentation, 15-20 minutes presentation, depending upon the number of enrollment. The midterm will be either, again, could be a home, a take-home kind of examination with a few questions for you to answer. There is no other homework or anything, but regular attendance is necessary, and it's important to follow the sequence of the verses and see the thread.
Great. Are there any, I'm not seeing any other questions. Is there any particular one of the 10 that you think you want to elaborate on right now, or just give some context to in our modern day relevance and what's going on, and try to apply it to daily life while we try to instigate some questions and some engagement from our audience? I know right now we're in a webinar format. The course itself will be in like a regular Zoom format meeting. So you'll be able to see your classmates and all those other things. So the engagement, the back and forth will be there.
There's a question on the chat box, I think.
Yeah, so the course is going to be on HUA's Learning Management System, LMS. So if maybe you haven't taken a course at HUA yet, but once you enroll, you get your own @hua.edu email ID that lets you log in. And we're using Moodle. If you're familiar with that, UC, University of California system uses it, a lot of other folks. And so in the course, week by week, there'll be links to the reading, to assignment, to whatever Dr. Swaminathan wants the class to have. And then after a course session passes, a link to the recording will be made available there. So you will have access to recordings afterwards. And everyone will get a recording of this webinar if you registered in the next couple of days with some of these links as well. All right, I see a question. How much sleep? What does it do? Kumuji from Boston is asking about sleep. Do the Daksinamurti Stotrams elaborate on sleep and it's important and how that affects us?
It doesn't talk about nothing to do with the sleep therapy or whatever like that, if that's what you have in if that's what you are asking. But sleep as an experience, how do we look at sleep? So the human being, let's just confine ourselves to a human being. There are the human being on a daily basis, as long as one lives, goes through three stages of experiences in a daily life, in a daily 24 hours span. There is a portion of the 24 hours where one is awake, and what we say the Jagrat Avastha, and then you interact at the time is where the maximum interaction with the world. By world, I mean in general. It could be with people, it could be events, with whatever. So that is the world. That is something other than you interact with. So that consumes a major portion of the waking hours. Then one retires to bed, and in the bed, sleep also as a component of what we say an experience which is in between waking and deep sleep. This is what we say dream. So waking experience, deep sleep experience, and there's an in-between what Ardha Vikasa is in between a dream experience. The dream experience also, there are transactions. You do transactions. There's a dream world that the mind projects. The dream world can be things that are seen in the waking hours, or it could be something the mind puts together also. And the mind creates also a body similar to the body available in the waking state, because the body goes to sleep the moment you retire to bed. The body is not available. This waking body is not available neither in the dream nor in the deep sleep. The mind is there in the dream, it projects. Then there is a dream experience. There is again a transaction. When I say transaction, as I said, for the waking hours, it's a subject-object transaction. So there is a duality. There's a subject interacting with an object. The object could be the empirical world in the waking, or it could be a dream world that the dreamer creates. Then there is this deep sleep avastha experience where the subject-object collapses. So there is no mind, there is no body. Yet that sleep is an anubhava, is an experience, because as one gets up, one says, I slept well, I slept happily, whatever. There is an experience of contentment after a deep sleep, a nice sleep. So we explore that sleep when that is an experience which consists of collapse of subject-object duality, an experience of where there is no special experience. In the dream, there is a subject-object experience. In the waking, there is a subject-object experience. But in the deep sleep, there is an experience of not experiencing an object. So that's a very special situation. But there is a contentment, because everybody longs to go to sleep. Animals want to go to sleep, plants sleep, human beings want to sleep, because if sleep is a terrible experience, nobody would want to sleep. That's not the case. So therefore, we examine that deep sleep, and the Shastra examines that. In fact, it examines all the three avasthas, three experiences in a daily basis, but particularly the deep sleep where the subject-object duality is resolved, because that is the truth, where there is no subject, where there is no object, and the absolute truth, the absolute reality, the ontological reality is that which makes the subject, the object, the object. So in that sense, Daksinamurti Stotram in one verse examines that. So we will look at that.
Wow. Right. Elaboration on sleep in so many different ways. Very interesting. Hariji is asking you to re-explain the third verse, right? The necessity of the guru. And this is something that comes up, and, Hindu University of America is a platform for people to connect with a guru if they can find them, right? And there's so much to that, the parampara, the lineage, the right guru for the right student. And so this third verse, if you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, the necessity of the guru. You see, the way we gather knowledge, right now, let us say empirical knowledge, any knowledge, empirical knowledge. Suppose if I open my eyes and I see a flower and it's a red rose, I comprehend it as a red rose because the eyes reveal the color of whatever that object is. And by training, we would label it as, we give a name to it called rose or whatever. And so it's a red rose. So that the eyes bring that information, then you all know how the image is formed, etc., etc. I'm not going to go into that thing. There is a cortex. In the cortex in the eye itself, there is some processing. Then there is a visual cortex in the back of the brain. It put together an image, you can gather knowledge. Then you can say, I know this flower. This is how knowledge takes place, where you use an instrument. That instrument, namely eye in this case, is the pramanam, the means of knowledge for revealing the color of that object. Okay, the form and the color of that object. The knower, that is namely I, who has the comprehension of that object, the knower, then there is a known. The knower, namely I, is wielding this pramanam eyes. I am the wielder, I am the operator of this pramanam to know something other than me, namely the rose. So this is how pramana works. And from this we gather a lot of information. So the subject, that is I, wield a relevant means of knowledge to gather information about non-I, other than me, namely the rose. So that's what we say an object. Subject is the defined object, that other than the subject. So the subject handles the pramana, the means of knowledge, gains knowledge about the non-subject. Okay, this is the setup. But in the case of self-knowledge, the self is the object of knowledge. So being the object of knowledge, the self cannot wield the operator of the pramanam and at the same time be the object of that knowledge. Because there's two loci cannot exist two things cannot exist in the same locus. So that won't work. So you need an external medium to operate the pramanam, and while I be the subject of that pramanam. What is the pramanam going to reveal? I be that prameya, what the pramanam reveals, but somebody else has to operate the means of knowledge. So the guru is therefore necessary. The guru acts that role. Guru is the one wields the pramanam, namely the Shruti, the words of the Shruti, the Vedas, the Upanishads. He wields the words to reveal the knowledge about the self, and so therefore I can become the object of knowledge without wielding the pramana. Otherwise I cannot be. So that is why you need a guru. Guru is very, very important, plays a very important role. It is like in this example, this may help. The guru holds a mirror for you to look at. You see, you can't look at your face unless you have a reflecting medium. The eyes see form, but the eyes cannot see themselves. Then if you have a mirror, then you see, the eyes see. So similarly, I cannot be the object of my own knowledge. If somebody else has to be that operator. So somebody holds the mirror, then I look at my face. So the guru holds the mirror of the Shruti, namely the words of the Upanishad, then I can see the reality of myself. So that's how guru is very important. Without guru, this thing doesn't work.
Very nice explanation and elaboration. Ramaji is asking you to please re-elaborate on what you explained about the material cause versus the efficient cause. And
okay.
There's a couple things that I would ask you to elaborate on and go back but that one was like really, I felt deep. So I appreciate that, sure. Ramaji.
Yeah, let's take a simple example, a pot made of mud or clay. So made of silicon oxide clay, a pot, mud pot. And the mud pot, there is a pot maker, Kulala. Kulala is a pot maker. And he will make the pot. So in other words, he will gather the mud and then mix it with the water and make a paste. Then he will have a potter's wheel and then a stick. So the stick, potter's wheel, and the clay, the material, these things constitute what we say generally, we'll club them under as a material cost. The materials needed to make the pot. Now the pot cannot assemble, even though the potter's wheel, the stick is there, and the powder silicon oxide, the sand is there, you mixed it with water, you made the clay paste, but it's not going to make itself. it needs an intelligent person. Intelligent person means one who has the concept of the pot, what shape it is, what dimension it is, how much volume it has to have. All that concept intelligent person should have. Otherwise, the pot cannot make it itself. So this intelligent person then handles that wheel and the stick and the clay to shape the pot into a final form. So then the pot comes, somebody buys that pot and walks home. But when the guy who buys the pot and walks home, he takes only the pot, not the intelligent guy, the pot maker. Pot maker remains where he is, the pot is gone. So therefore, in this example, this is how everything in the empirical world. There is an efficient cause. Efficient means the one who has the intelligence to make something. So that is the pot maker. Then we have the pot, the effect, which has certain materials, the clay, the potter's wheel, etc. Potter's wheel and the stick are instrumental cause, but I club them as materials. So you have the material, which is the upadana karanam. Then you have the intelligence, the nimitta karanam, the pot maker. So in this empirical creation, the nimitta upadana karanam are different. If they are not different, we are in trouble, because every time we go to the store to buy a loaf of bread, then we have to bring the baker to our home. Thank God they are different. But if you examine whether there are two such things in the creation, in the causal principle, is the material cause is one principle, and the efficient cause is a divergent or a different principle, different from the material, like in the pot maker example. If you examine and you pull that thread, you will find that you cannot have two different causes. They have to be in only one cause. Both have to be in one locus. So it has to reside in one thing alone. Both the causes have to emanate from one thing. Then only it will be in one absolute reality. So that we will study that when we examine our verses, but that is the idea. So it is abhinna nimitta upadhana karanam. Ishvara, the reality, that causal principle represents the principle of the jagat, the karanam, cause of the jagat, is abhinna nimitta upadhana, where the nimitta, efficient cause, and the upadhana, the material cause, are non-different. They are one and the same.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Swaminathan. I have this poll up. I have about half of our attendees who have filled it out. If you don't see the poll, please hit the minimize button, maximize. It really helps us to follow up with enrollments if you're interested. If you're not, just either way, fill it out. And also there's some other questions on our webinars, and we're going to be restructuring our webinars. So we would like your feedback on that as well. Chitraji is asking, does the guru have to be a live guru?
I see. Preferably so, I would say yes. Of course, you draw inspiration from gurus who are not around us. Like Swami Dayananda is not around me physically, but I draw inspiration. At some point or other in your pursuit of this knowledge, one should have some physical, in-person experience with the guru. So then you can then listen. After that, a few classes, a few whatever time that you spend in close association with the guru, then after that you can listen to the recordings of that guru or whatever. So that is how that is what the recommendation would be. But we always draw inspiration from the past gurus. Sankara is no longer here, but everything is inspired by Sankara. My guru is not around in the physical form, but I still learn from him from that inspiration point of view. But I have a physical guru that I learned from even today.
Great. Anonymous attendee. Well, we like it when people put their names, but this is continuing on the third verse. Would it be fair to say that the guru only acts as an assistance facilitator to enable the individual, now dealing with the subject-object conundrum, breaking the duality or break the duality by seeing for oneself. And I think the way that you talked about the mirrors put up to yourself, or the guru is doing that, that really fits into it. I think that question came after, but maybe if you want to.
Yes, the teacher's role is, as in the example I gave you, is only to hold the mirror. He is holding a mirror, that's all. And the responsibility is lies with the one who looks at the mirror. So that's all. The role of the guru is not make the role of the guru is make you to see, but whether you see it or not is your responsibility. You know, there is a proverb they say, right? You can take the horse to the pond, but the horse won't drink. You can't make the horse drink. It's exactly the same thing. The guru is a facilitator. He presents what the Shastra says, and he transfers it. The guru is being a teacher who is absorbed in this commitment of this knowledge and has that knowledge. When he reveals, the transmission errors are going to be less, but the recipient can have errors. Transmission is both ways. You know, it has to come from me to you. So it's not only the antenna, but the receiver. It's not only the transmitter, but the receiver also in a good shape. So that how to keep the receiver capable to receive, it's the receiver's responsibility. And for that, there are many methods prescribed and so on. Actually, if God willing, in the next summer, in the fall, I might teach a class in HUA on sadhana panchakam. It tells the means, how one should prepare oneself.
Great, great. And that's the continuity of learning, right? Get through one and then go on to the next. And Hindu University of America is glad to be a platform for folks like you, Dr. Swaminathan, to share with people like Dharm, who says your explanation is incredibly thorough and articulate. I'm really impressed, hopefully impressed enough to take the course. And so that is kind of what we're pushing for. Let's enroll in this course. I'll drop a link and the details in the chat one more time. If you missed it, if you didn't fill out the poll, please do. I don't see any more questions. So this course is going to start on this Tuesday, July 11th, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Probably go for an hour and a half, and depending on how generous Dr. Swaminathan is, maybe a little longer if there's a lot of questions. It's going to end about September 19th, so a week through that time frame. Please do consider enrolling. I think the course will also count towards your certificate program in Hindu Studies, if that's a program that you're enrolled in. Yeah, thank you everyone for staying with us today. Dr. Swaminathan, closing thoughts?
Yeah, thank you all for taking the time on a Sunday afternoon to attend this webinar. And, God willing, you would take this class. If you do take it, I think you will enjoy it and benefit from it, because as I mentioned, instead of looking at all the Upanishads separately and trying to gather what the Upanishads knowledge is, in one simple set of 8 plus 2 verses, the entire gamut of essence of Upanishads are summarized. So this is in one place, you get everything, then you can branch off and study whatever you want to study. So thank you again for taking the time.
All right, thank you. Dhanyawad, everyone. Namaste.